Hello, salam, shalom, namaste, sasakal, aloha, hola, ciao, bonjour, buna, привет, mabuhay, and jean dobre. It's so good to be with you again, and I know you'll be extra happy today that you're joining us because we have a very special guest who's a returning guest also, and is Jahanvi Shah, and she is a conscious parenting coach. Welcome back, Jahanvi.
Thank you. Thank you. It's so good to be back again. Looking forward to this conversation.
Oh, yes, me too, me too. So for those of you who may have missed our last episode together, Jahanvi and I were talking about parenting styles, basically, and sort of like the actually attachment styles, I think is the more proper word to use. And, it sort of describes the different kinds of relationships you can develop with your children. And actually, I think you can even see those kinds of patterns in other relationships that we have, but we were talking about it primarily in the context of parents and children. Johnny, could you maybe give us a real quick recap of the four different attachment styles you had shared with
Yeah,
us last time?
absolutely, absolutely. So basically, our attachment style is created when we're children, as we talked last time, based on the relationship we have with our parents, because our survival depends on them, right? We know that secure attachment is developed when our primary caregivers are attuned, responsive, and somewhat predictable, if not 100% of the times. So, and when we're raised by people who are able to regulate their emotions themselves, they give us this ability to express ourselves, and fully be who we are. And our parents, I know we did the best they could based on their resources. The reality is a lot of us just didn't get this. We were raised by maybe distracted, overwhelmed, stressed parents who might have been unhappy in their marriage, carrying their own unresolved traumas, or who were distant or cold. And, so we never got the chance to develop that secure attachment or the ability to trust that people are going to fully be there for us. But the best part about these attachment styles, Samya, is it's not set in stone. They're fluid, and that means they are our, styles can change and develop over time, right? So I personally have an anxious avoidant attachment style. That was one of the styles we talked about last week. And I have done a lot of work around creating a more secure attachment. All of us can really do this, if we can commit to it and show ourselves a lot of compassion along the way. So as before we started here, I was telling Samia, like the good news is now as adults, our survival depends on us, and we have a unique opportunity to become the loving parent that we didn't get, right? We can give ourselves the things that we really needed in our childhood. And in the process, we can develop this more secure attachment, right? So a secure relationship with ourselves helps us feel safe, that safety, and it helps us identify our thoughts, needs, feelings in the moment and respond appropriately, not react, respond appropriately, right?
Yeah.
So, that's just to give you, I mean, we went a lot more in details in part one, but I want to kind of recap about it, where it's all developed and there is hope.
For sure, for sure. We are all about learning to make change fun and easy. And in that context, we acknowledge that, yes, change is possible. And although you may be experiencing it as difficult right now, there are ways that we can learn, to make it more fun and easy. There's more support that we can find and receive so that it begins to feel more fun and easy. And so, yeah, I'm so happy that we're getting to talk about this. Because like I said before, even though we are um, primarily talking about it in the context of parents and children, as you alluded, it's also actually very relevant to our relationship with ourselves and I think our other relationships as well. So I'm so happy you're here.
Yeah, yeah, me too.
Yeah, so last time we not only delved more deeply into talking about, okay, well, there is this secure attachment that you described. That's the ideal that we would all love to experience. And then there's, degrees of, well, you don't get to have that in the context of the other attachment styles. So I mean, we would talk through some of the challenges that people can experience in the context of having those other kinds of attachment styles and experiencing those kinds of attachment styles. And I was hoping like today, we could really sort of focus on talking about, well, how do we develop this more secure attachment style? Um, First of all, like you said, Jani, in our own relationship with ourselves, and then starting to emanate that out in our other
Yeah,
relationships. So, what, just, yeah, tell me more. Tell me
yes,
more. Yeah.
yes.
Hey, thanks for tuning into this episode. Hope you're getting value out of it. For your information, this episode has been sponsored by the Happiness 101 program. Are you a change maker, coach, trainer, or healer? Are chains of fear holding you back from making the impact and income you desire? Using a unique combination of positive psychology and the spiritual wisdom of our most effective change makers, the Happiness 101 program helps you break through your limiting beliefs and manifest the abundance and success you desire with fun and ease. Interested? Book a free Happiness 101 exploration call with me, your happiness expert, Samia Bano. Just use my online calendar link in the show notes. Now, back to the show.
It always starts with us, right? It always
Yeah.
starts with us. With parenting, through parenting, I learned that myself. In my other relationship, I didn't learn it. But, when I became a mom, when I was, getting triggered left and right with my daughter, that was a wake-up call for me that, hey, maybe just there is a 1%, it's not my daughter, it's me who needs to shift. My expectation of her cooperation, listening to me and doing the right thing, being disciplined, all those things, yes, that's all good. And we want to teach our children, but it starts here first. And then it's going to just flow out into the world in all your relationship. So the first piece we have to do in this process is we have to know our own story.
Mm,
If you don't know yourself, you're going to play out your story in ways that are unconscious and are confusing even, right? We have got to put in that work to reflect on our childhood attachment relationships.
mm,
And you cannot just think about it. I'm sorry. You can just think about it. We have to feel it. I
yeah.
remember, Samia, one of my coaches told me once, feel it to heal it. I still
Uh,
remember that. I know for days I put it on my refrigerator, and now it's just ingrained in me. Feel it to heal it. You have to be able to put that emotional process to it. Like, what did it feel? What did it feel like in my own story? I'll
mm,
share, like in my own story, my mom is a wonderful person and she did the best she could, but she tried to give us what she didn't have and didn't have the opportunity to heal her trauma and do her own work. So really there was a pattern of being less available emotionally than available. So I developed this hypervigilant, right? And a role of a caretaker of her emotions, her emotional needs. And what
Mm.
happened with that, Samia, it created in me this ambivalent pattern of being hypervigilant, of wanting more, and more validation from people in order to feel secure within me, and never really feeling secure, even when people were offering that validation to me. I mean, believe
Mm.
it or not, this still sucks me in. A lot of times, like, I just had something happen last year, and it took me almost a year to heal over that, because this is so ingrained in us. For me, it
Mm.
was, where I'm just seeking validation in all my relationship, because that
Yeah.
makes me feel safe, right?
Yeah.
So it's really interesting when you learn about your story, you have better. So awareness is the first step, right? You have to be curious about how we grew
Yes.
up, and then we want to learn about our spouses and our children, our own parents, and our own relationship, about their stories. You
Yeah.
know, getting curious, like, what is their story here? Where is this all coming from? And
Yes.
also, on the side note, I just thought of something in our own stories. It's not just our early attachment stories. I just want to point that out, because it's also the other relationship that we develop later on also. So you can
Mm.
really, let's say, have a most secure childhood,
Mm.
and you can end up with someone who's really abusive to you later in life. And then that can really rewire your brain to be a little bit on edge, or more fight flight related than it used to be. Or it could be
Yeah.
vice versa, where you have an amazing partner who's really good to you. And it really helps you heal from your childhood, attachment.
Yes. You know what you were just sharing was making me think about my own experiences in my relationships, and particularly, made me think about me and my mom. I mean, my mom has been one of the most defining and central relationships in my life, and one of the most um, consistently there relationships. I mean that in the sense that, my family has moved around a fair bit, and so there have been lots of people who have come into my life, but also then just been left behind every time our family made a move. But my mom has always been there, and so it makes sense, obviously, that, she's been an extremely important presence in my life. And, one of the things that I was thinking about in terms of attachment styles and, um, you know, um, and like our experience, like thinking about what was my experience growing up as a child. And so on the one hand, with my mom, I experienced lots and lots of love and care. She just showered so much love and care on me in so many different ways. Um, and if I think of like maybe one challenge that I experienced, was this feeling of needing to be vigilant, but in a different sense than what you were talking about, Jahanvi. Because like with my mom, she was always very concerned about safety, and our safety. And so she was always looking out for like what might go wrong and how she can keep us safe. And I learned that from her also. I mean, there were many reasons other than learning that from her, because of which I didn't feel safe myself. But the point was that I learned to become hyper vigilant as a way to help me feel safe, um, like in terms of always being on the lookout of what could get me in trouble, and then doing everything I could to keep myself safe. And a lot of time that meant just containing my world into a much smaller space. Like I would, like actually, well until I was in college, I had very few relationships that I even tried to create and maintain. Like I actually really struggled to have any friends at all because I had like so many fears of different kinds. And when I thought about wanting to create a new friend, I was just so inhibited, like with so many fears, that I really couldn't get around to making any friends. And so then I would just redouble, like my just spending time with my family, like my brother, my sister, my parents. And it was like, that's it. And then, you're like, I don't even need anyone else.
Yeah.
But really, it wasn't that I didn't need or want anyone else, but it was just that reaction because I was struggling so much to actually create other friendships because I struggled to be vulnerable. I struggled to be real, with other people and so on and so forth. And so it's just, and as I have been working on, my own healing and learning to actually make friends and making friends and stepping out more into doing different things in the world, I often still feel that pull of old memories and old habits where the fears can come in and be like, no, no, be careful, play safe,
Yeah.
take smaller steps, don't take so much risk, and so that was like what was coming to me.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. It's hard like when you have overprotective parent who means well, but you know how now you recognize it that brought you so many it didn't allow you to be yourself. It didn't allow you to create friendships. You were always careful. Like in your brain, probably you said, hey, it's better to not have friendship than have friendship and then have a heartbreak, afterwards. So it's better to keep myself safer than involved. And family, for you, at least you had family where you felt safety, where you felt like, okay, I can be in this space and feel safe enough. But yeah, it didn't let you expand and evolve as what maybe you were meant to do. But it's great you have this awareness now that this is where it came from. And now you can shift. It's not like knowing it and then feeling miserable about it, that, hey, I lost all these years, but hey, now I know what can I change now? What can I do things differently now? Because this is not me. This is not my authentic, this is not me, my true essence. So now I know that, and it's such a fresh breath of air. And now I can rewrite my stories.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like also, when you were sharing about being aware of not just your own story and experiences, but also being aware of like, since we're talking about parents, being more aware of our parents' stories. And so as I've grown up, obviously, it has given me the opportunity to learn more of my mom's struggles and her stories. And now that I know more of what she experienced, I can totally see why she struggled with the fears that she struggled with. And there was definitely some of that experience that she had where, she had actually amazing parents, my grandparents. I've been lucky enough that I got to grow up with them. They're no more with us, but I had many wonderful years to spend as a child with them. But like for my mom, a lot of the like what she says is like after she got married, and she actually moved to live with my dad and his family. She was like, first of all, she moved countries because my mom's from Pakistan, my dad's from India. So first of all, she moved countries to go be with my dad. And so she was in a different cultural context, and there was just a very different dynamic that my dad's family had than what my mom had experienced. And she was like, I received so many shocks in terms of both at a broader cultural level, but within the context of her relationships with her in-laws, where there was a lot more harshness that she experienced. There was a lot more like just negative drama. And so as she was, experiencing this phase in her life where new relationships were entering and so forth, that there was, this experience of difficult relationships that she had entered into her life that she had never had to deal with before. So that made her feel afraid in her own way, where
Oh,
expanding into and exploring and building new relationships.
that makes sense. That makes total sense, where it's all coming from.
Yeah.
She didn't, she did what she needed to do to keep her safe, keep herself safer, protect herself and survive, right? Like she was in survival mode, a lot of years of her life. So she did
Yeah.
the best she could, and that's the pattern she developed with her circumstances. And now, so like it's so interesting, like understanding her story, what happened in their world that shaped their ability or their lack of ability for relating in safe, secure ways. And we could have so much more compassion and grace towards our parents or anyone, right, in our lives. So it's so helpful, like to know, like, now I get it, why it's so hard for you to stay tender when I talk to you about my emotions, right? Like I understand that now, I have compassion for that, and I'm going to ask you like I'm talking about my spouse as I'm saying this, like now I'm going to ask you to grow so we can take better care of each other, right? Like
Mm,
with the parent-child dynamic, it will be different, like from like adult child and a parent. But if parents are willing to, grow, I mean, nothing like it, if they're willing to put it,
yeah.
it's never too late. It's never too late. I know in our culture, it's like, hey, after I pass a certain age, that's it. Like I cannot change. This is set in stone now, and
Yeah.
and it's hard. At this age, I can do that. But it's possible. Like I have seen, you need the willingness and intention, and anything is possible.
Yes. Yes. I don't know what it is about how, because I know what you're talking about in our culture, people having this mindset of like after a certain age, just believing that, this is it. Like, you don't even think change for you is possible, and therefore not even striving for it. Whereas, I must say that this is one of the things that we have found to be very different after we moved to America. Like
Mm.
after we moved to America, we came here to Los Angeles more specifically because we already had some extended family here. And actually one of the family members that we had over here because of whom we came was my mom's aunt. And like she's my mom's actual aunt, but I call her, I think of her as my grandmother. So I'm going to call her grandmother. And so my grandmother here, um, she came to America in the 80s. And so by the time we came here in the early 2000s, she had already been living here over 20 years. And like my mom remembered her from, when she was much younger and they all used to live together in Pakistan. And after she came and got reacquainted in some ways with her aunt here in America, my mom was like, wow, she's such a different person than she used to be in so many different ways.
Yeah.
And it was like an actually like for my mom, she just kept remarking on, oh, my aunt is different in this way over here, and she's different in that way over here.
Wow. Yeah.
And and I think it really encouraged her to
Mhm.
also try on different things. Like over here, my mom, she enrolled to take classes in community college. I mean, not a whole lot, and the classes were related to basically how to take better care of like people with disabilities. Because my brother has a disability, and so my mom was encouraged actually by my grandmother's example to be like, oh yeah, like I shouldn't assume that we can just learn everything we need to learn by just, like within the context of like learning from family. It's like there's a value to going to learn about such things, like taking a class in college.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And
Wow.
yeah, so that was something that I was like, yay. I was so happy when my mom took those classes because she went and she made so many friends. And even after the classes were over, she had her friends from class
Oh,
continuing to come meet with her and so forth. And it created a huge difference in her life.
oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Like when you open up, there's so much possibilities, like you don't even know. I'm sure a part of her she didn't even know existed that could feel that joy and friendships and all that. And she got that in her life that probably she didn't experience ever before. So that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that story. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, change is possible, it's just taking one tiny steps at a time. You don't have to take a huge leap. Just little steps could still, do the move the needle. But yeah,
Yeah.
so it's so nice knowing our loved ones' stories, our story first, and then our loved ones, and then the next step, Samia, is to, to really we're looking at and then we're exploring right now.
Yeah.
What we're looking at is the process of demolition and repairs. So identifying basically the maladaptive patterns that we're engaged in, and then beginning to demo them. So for me, in my attachment process, I'll tell you, that was really starting to recognize with my husband that, oh, I'm needing that constant data. I'm not actually absorbing that data.
Mm.
So my negative pattern is that I want to be reassured, and I'm not actually internalizing that love, that support, that encouragement. And so I need to learn how to let that stuff in and not just constantly reach for the next assurance or reassurance.
Ah,
It was such a wake-up call for me that, this is what's happening with me in my marriage, like it was such a wake-up call for me. So like it's so interesting. Everything I learned in my parenting, then I applied in my marriage. It was such a huge shift. But then, we start writing the secure stories, right? Like we want to, like what's been done is great, getting that awareness. And now how can we rewrite those stories, right? So it's going to be such a beautiful journey. Sometimes it's going to be
yeah.
extremely hard because feeling our feels is not easy because we've never learned how to do that from the get-go. Maybe our next generation will be more flowy with that because we have broken a lot of generational patterns. But, we've developed into this pattern now, you're going to need to develop this new pattern. So it's going to take some time, but through curiosity, through a lot of questioning, and not questioning in the sense in a criticizing way, but getting curious. I got curious about my partner, like, that I'm doing the work, not to jump to conclusions about why you're doing that or why you're not doing that. I'm doing the work to make sure that, that we want to do the work, so we're in charge of defining our intentions. I still say to my husband that, hey, this is what you're doing, or this thing you're not doing is having an impact on me, and I'm going to hold curiosity for you. Can you help me understand what's going on for you? Because I want to know what's behind all of this, what's on the surface, or all that's happening. And I'm sharing with you how it's impacting me, because it might impact me differently if I understand it differently, right? So trying to offer that curiosity piece. And I think we miss that in a lot of our relationship with our children, with our partners, with our any close relationships. Like we just look at the behavior of our children, of our
Yes.
kids, and we come to conclusion they are misbehaving, or they're disrespecting me, or hey, my husband doesn't get me, he's just throwing tantrums left and right. and,
Yes.
but we're not looking beneath the iceberg, right? We're not looking at the iceberg. So it's
Oh,
yeah.
so true. And you know what you just made me think of, Jahanvi, is I recently had this experience in a different, in a context of, so I was actually chairing a city committee meeting. Among other things, I volunteer for my city's Equity and Human Relations Advisory Committee. And we, had at this particular meeting, we had like maybe 30, 40 different people who showed up, and they were doing public comment. They were actually, what they were asking for from us through public comment was that we organize a dialogue within the community, because there's some conflict that we're experiencing in the city on a issue I won't get into right now, because that'll just take us off on a whole different tangent. But the point is, the citizens were petitioning us to hold a dialogue on an issue that is definitely sensitive, and it's been creating a fair amount of tension in the city. And some of them expressed what they were needing and wanting with emotion. And some of those emotions that they were expressing were definitely, there was a lot of distress, a lot of frustration, and some of them were even angry. And like from me, from like my perspective, that's what I was seeing, and that's what I was understanding. And I was like, okay, here's the people who, I mean, they were literally saying we're not feeling heard, we're feeling we're being ignored, we're feeling like no one cares about what we need and what we're suffering and so forth. And I'm like, okay, so here's the people who was like literally crying out for help, crying out for compassion, crying out for understanding, and asking us to do something about it. And so, uh, that understanding or that perspective on what I was seeing, hearing, put me in my compassion mode. I was like, and I was very inclined to respond with said compassion. And the thought of, oh, they're being offensive, or they're being difficult, or like those thoughts didn't even enter my mind. But what happened is that there were other people. Obviously, I wasn't the only person on our committee, and there's also, so there were some other people who were, on my end of the like part of the committee and staff and so forth, and some of them were actually turned out feeling like we were being attacked, like the public members of the public that they were like, don't be rude, don't use profanity, don't, be quiet, don't interrupt, and and then it was, I got a little bit of, um, this didn't happen during the meeting itself, but afterwards, I had some members from staff and other committee members who were like, Samia, you as chair are responsible for maintaining discipline and decorum at the meetings, and we feel that you didn't do as good a job as you should have, because when this person said this, why didn't you stop them from, using XYZ language? Or when this person did that, why didn't you tell them to be quiet, etc.? And I was like, I did and said everything that I felt needed to be said when it needed to be said. And I'm honestly telling you, I did not, these examples that you're giving me of when I should have done this and when I should have done, I truly did not see a need to do that. And I didn't even want to do that because, like what I said, it's like what you're asking me to do is to respond to these people with a certain level of harshness and with this attitude of we're going to be so strictly following these rules that we have decided upon, and just be more, and it's just like be offended that this rule wasn't followed, and so forth, and then because you get offended that the rule wasn't followed, then it's just kind of then you end up feeling angry, and you yourself are feeling frustration at how badly the public is behaving, and that kind of thing. And it's just, but so if the public is feeling what the public is feeling, but then we have this interpretation of what the public is doing, that is, oh, they're being disruptive, they're being bad, etc. Where then we begin to lose the possibilities of creating.
Focus on what we're
Yes.
there for in the first place, right?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. Like we get so much involved in our egos and correcting and criticizing people that we completely miss the boat of what actually needs to happen. And it gets, yeah, for so I think in society, I see a lot of the example you gave me, like lack of having those skills, those nonviolent communication skills. We don't know how to do, nonviolent communication. We don't know how to have empowered conversations. We don't have those skills. It's either, by force, by hook or crook kind of a thing. I'm going to get my way. And that kind of comes into relationships too. Like this is, we know like in our, work industry, it's very normal. It's very common. But even when we see it coming into families and between parent-child relationships and between, between spouse, partners, it's like, it's like we're seeing it everywhere. And it's because lack of having those skills. We don't know how to communicate. Have you heard of Michael Huttenberg, nonviolent communication?
Yes. Yes. Actually, I'm so happy you mentioned him and his framework of nonviolent communication, because I was actually wanting to talk to you about that, because I know they have, there's a framework for nonviolent communication in general, but then they have done, applications of it for different specific contexts. So I know, for example, they have written books on parenting using nonviolent communication and applying it in many other contexts as well. Um, and one of the things that really struck me when I think about nonviolent communication is, and this is also like a huge issue that I see that I don't think people always realize that there's a problem where on the surface of things, actually, like especially in the context of the professional world, like when I'm, for example, dealing with city business, there is there is a standard of professionalism that you're expected to maintain and that people do maintain. And that standard of professionalism requires you, for example, to maintain a certain tone of voice and not be shouting at each other and um, things like that. I mean, so that on the surface, there is like there's a there's a sense of, okay, there's decorum, there's restraint, there is people are treating each other in a proper way, which is considered a good way. But I think what people often miss is that that's just like, and insofar as that helps maintain a peace in our interaction, it's a very surface level piece because underneath that presentation of decorum and restraint, there is just so much blaming and judging and just negative emotion that's there. And in nonviolent communication, there's so much emphasis on, no, you don't just behave in a nonviolent way, but you also have to think and feel nonviolence. Like if you're blaming and shaming and judging, that's a violent way of
So it's not
thinking and
just
feeling.
physical violence, it's an
Yes,
emotional violence as well.
exactly. Exactly. It's mental, emotional violence. And a lot of people don't realize that. They don't even recognize
Yeah,
that
it's
as being a
interesting you
form of
say
violence.
that. Yeah, I mean, I had one parent when I mentioned them about nonviolent communication, Dr. Rosenberg's book. She's like, but I don't hit my child. Yes, that's great. You don't hit your child, but you cannot damage child's. It's not just physical hurt, it's the psychological hurt
Yeah,
also
yeah,
damages the child. So you may be physically not hurting them, but if you're emotionally not available for your child, it's equally, maybe more, deeper level of
yes,
it just gets such ingrained in their psyche. And a lot of times, like, I don't like, spanking and all, it was norm. It's not that normal. Still it is to a certain extent. But I know growing up in my culture, in our culture, there was like spanking is not a big, it's part of the culture, part of growing up. You get beaten up, right? But somewhere down the road, it subconsciously, if not consciously, it remains in your psyche. I had a dad come to me that, hey, I was beaten up and I turned out well, right? Like that was his argument.
yeah,
I'm like, when we got deeper into the conversation, we learned how he unknowingly every other week beating up his own wife. And it was like it was a pattern that he didn't even realize happening, with him as well. And because of that violence in the house and how it was impacting the children, and the children, then one day he saw his son, beating up another child, and he's like, hey, you don't, he also beat him up because he beat up the child to teach him not to beat. I'm like,
Mm.
you're teaching your child not to beat another child by beating? I mean, think about it. Does it make sense, right? Like we don't think
Yeah.
about it. But yeah, what you're saying, yeah, it's emotionally, it's like, gosh, it damages you so badly, for sure.
Yes. You know, the example, Jahanvi, that you just shared of the dad beating his child to teach him not to beat the other child. Um, I actually, that was, like made me think about, again, what I was saying a little bit earlier, that, in society, we have been taught to, especially in the context of our public interactions, professional interactions, to maintain this kind of surface level, at least, persona of professionalism, of nonviolent behavior. And so it's like when you beat your child to teach them not to beat another child, what you're really teaching them is, when you're in public, when you're dealing with other people, you need to maintain a certain, level of niceness in how you treat other people. But when, we're within a more intimate context, and uh, then it's okay for then we get to behave in a different way. Then we get to behave um, in a way that perhaps we're really feeling, in terms of like expressing the anger that we're feeling and etc. And it may not be the most healthy expression, but a lot of people feel like, that these personal relationships are where they get to take that anger out, and because they're not allowed to do it anywhere else.
It reminds me of a story, my personal, oh, very personal story. I don't know if I shared with you. Maybe I did it with Dr. Ronnie, but long story short, like I was, at work, didn't know how to deal with my emotions. Somebody must have disrespected me, said something, but I didn't know how to stand up for myself back then. And I
Mm.
remember holding on to those emotions, kind of shoving it under the rug and moving on with the day like nothing happened. And then I come home, my child is not obeying me, not
Mm.
doing what I asked her off doing, and not listening to me. And that anger that I didn't let out in a healthier way and just shoved it down came out on this little child who is
Mm.
weaker than that person, right? Like not that I should have lashed out at that person, but I should have processed my emotions, but I didn't
Mm.
know what to do with my emotions. I didn't
Mm.
feel them. So I put it all on my little child that night, I remember. And that pivotal moment that happened with my child, that's when that was the story. That's my story that changed everything. That was the night I told,
Yeah.
that's it. But yeah, I totally relate to that. We don't know how to deal with, the upper figure, like
Yeah.
something happened with our boss, and we're not going to say anything because, hey, maybe out of respect, maybe because we don't know how to have those communication. We don't have those communication skills.
Mm.
We
Yeah.
put it on our loved ones or where we feel more secure
Yes.
or to whoever comes in front of us in our homes, a household. Which is
Yeah.
sad, it's not their fault. It wasn't my daughter's fault. I lashed out on her. And because I didn't know how to deal with my emotions, I didn't know how to
Yeah.
do better communication. So,
Yeah. So let's shift to talking about, well, so much of the problems that we face is because we don't know how to communicate better and so forth. So can you share with us some tools, some ways for better communication and
yeah,
the like?
absolutely. I would love to. As we were talking, we started this conversation about how we can shift it to a secure attachment style. And
Mm.
I begin about saying you need to get to know your story and then rewriting those stories and then getting to know your loved one's stories and helping them rewrite their stories. That's a process. It's not going to happen overnight, as we know. But along the way, I wanted to leave your audience with, yes, some tools that they can start doing it as they are learning about their stories. So with, any triggers, anything that happens, getting curious about it, right? But along the way, what you can do is you can, I want to actually invite your audience to make and keep one small tiny promise to themselves today in order to build that secure attachment. Is, I gently want to invite you to learn to how to secure with yourself. The journey begins with us, as we said, and a lot of us, including myself, have learned to betray ourselves, right? To please or calm others or neglect our own feelings and needs, and in order to keep others happy, or not knowing how to communicate, like in my case, that happened too. So by making and keeping this one promise to ourselves, we can rebuild our own self-trust and confidence. In order to create the secure attachment, it's so important to pay attention to us. So we have to be aware of our number one, feelings, number two, thoughts, and number three, needs. So today, again, I want to invite you all to make this small promise to yourself to take just 3 poses a day, and this is going to become like a ongoing, like more fluent. But in the beginning, I want you to start practicing by maybe setting up an alarm 3 times a day, where it's going to just take you 2 minutes, but and just literally, take those 3 pauses. And what I call it is SCIS, so it's self check-ins. And this is what you're going to do during those SCISs, self check-ins, is naming it. So first question you're going to ask, how am I feeling physically? How am I feeling emotionally? What are my thoughts right now? And what am I needing right now? So again, what am I feeling physically? What am I feeling emotionally? What are my thoughts right now? And what am I needing right now? Something very simple and straight to the point, but I really invite you to take just 3 pauses in a day, 3 times a day. That will tremendously help you become more aware of your feelings, your thoughts, your needs in the moment, which we tend to ignore it most of the times. And then the next step here is to validate in response to your thoughts, feelings, and needs. So I'll give you a quick example. Let's just do it right now. Like, for instance, what am I feeling right now? Okay, I'm feeling thirsty. So physically, I'm feeling thirsty. What am I feeling emotionally? I'm feeling very excited because I'm doing this, and this is my favorite topic. So that's my feeling, excitement. And physically, I think I'm feeling also thirsty and a little tired. I didn't sleep well last night. My son woke up, so tiredness, a little bit of hunger, a little bit of thirst, and excitement. And then my thought is like, my son didn't sleep well, so I didn't get to sleep well. Okay, I need some water. So actually, I'm gonna get some water right now. Like, we ignore these simple things, right? Like simple going to the restroom, drinking water, like our biological needs get ignored so much. And so being aware of it, and I know I'm needing some sleep. So after we're done here, even though I have so much work to do, I'm going to take a pause. I'm going to take that nap that's much needed, and I know I'm going to be much more productive afterwards. So like pausing and realizing your biological need, your emotional need, your thought process, and what you're needing, it's so critical. And I'll tell you, the other day, my husband got so angry, and now that I'm understanding his story, like I knew he was not angry, he was hangry. He needed food. But we are so biologically, within ourselves, so disconnected that we don't, and it's simple as, hey, if we would have conversation after he had some lunch, it would have gone so much more smoother But I recognized, I said, hey, let's grab something to eat before we continue with this conversation. And bingo, that's what he was needed. So I recognized that for him. And now I think he's getting more aware of it after so many instances like this. Like my daughter said, Papa is hangry, so let's get some food. Like my daughter even knows now. So I think take 3 pauses, something so simple, guys, but it's going to make tremendous difference
Mm,
day, life with your children, with your relationship, with your work. You're going to be much more productive. Like I know the old me would have gone straight without that nap that I'm planning on taking, and I would have been miserable by the time my kids get home, and I'm going to be lashing out at them because I'm sleep deprived, I'm hungry maybe, I didn't look after myself. So now I'm putting it all on them, which is not fair to them. So
yeah.
I'll leave you with those something very simple and you can start doing today.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much for that, Johnny. Because I think um, I think a lot of us, we don't realize actually just how deeply connected our thoughts and feelings and needs are. And, even like, um, I know like for me, for a long time, um, I used to, once I started on learning about emotional wellness and healing and so forth, even then, for a while, I didn't recognize the connection between how I'm feeling physically and how I'm feeling mentally and emotionally.
Yeah.
So the fact that you just made us aware of checking in at these 4 levels, I think is so key. And I want to just, highlight for people that it's not just that you are checking these 4 levels of how you're doing: physical, emotional, thoughts, and needs. That uh, the thing is that they're all connected with each other. What you're thinking has a direct impact on how you're feeling, and how you're thinking and feeling has a direct impact on and is impacted by, like how you may be feeling or experiencing things at a physical level and what you're needing. It's all kind of like connected with each other.
Yes. Yes. Totally. Yes.
Yeah.
The secure attachment with self is where it all starts. That's where we.
Yes. Yes. And you so beautifully showed us how by starting with this practice with yourself, you can then begin to expand it out into your other relationships as well. It's really, really awesome. Thank you so much for sharing this with us.
Thank
Uh,
you for allowing me. Thank
uh, yes. Okay, so even though I have lots more that I want to talk with you about, I will resist that temptation right now just because of time constraints. And my last reminder to our audience is just to please make sure you check the show notes, because we will be dropping Jahanvi's links in there so you can connect with her and continue to learn with her. And until we connect next time, I wish you lots and lots of peace and joy.